All right. Well, good morning and welcome to the Index on Air panel. I'm Roli Saxena and I'm very excited to moderate this panel on hiring in remote world. We have two very impressive people leaders on the panel, Fraser from Sonos and Heather Sullivan from Discord. Two very incredible companies, very popular within the Saxena household. And and these two women are incredible in not only navigating these companies through interesting times that we are all going through, but also building incredible culture along the way. So before I turn it over to Anna and Heather to introduce themselves, I want to quickly introduce myself. I've been an operating leader for the last 20 years, focused on go-to-market. I'm on the board of Culture Amp, which is also another Index Ventures company, portfolio company, focused on employee engagement and performance management. Till most recently, I was a chief customer officer at Brex, and prior to that, led multiple revenue organizations at LinkedIn, selling into HR and recruiting organizations. So I've been in and around hiring, culture, and talent, both as a revenue leader, but also as an operating leader myself. Had the opportunity to see multiple companies go through hyper growth. When I joined LinkedIn, we were pre-IPO, and when I left, we were over 10,000 employees. I've also been around the block long enough to see that every economic cycle meaningfully shifts with how people hire and how people retain their talent and build culture. I've seen the evolution from going from agencies in the 80s to the job board world with Monster and Hot Jobs in the 90s, to a LinkedIn-driven recruiting organizations that LinkedIn, sort of network-driven recruiting organizations that LinkedIn brought. And now we're going through another massive shift in how people work on a day-to-day basis. And so this topic of what is future of work, how to recruit people in this new world, how to retain them, how to build incredible cultures is one of the topics that's top of mind for every CEO and every people leader. So I'm really excited to actually dig deeper with both Heather and Anna on this topic. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather to introduce herself.
Morning, everybody, or afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. I'm Heather Sullivan. I'm the Chief People Officer at Discord. If you're unfamiliar with Discord, we're a free communication service with voice and video and text that enables our over 100 million users to hang out and talk with friends in their communities online, which, as we know, these are highly unusual times. And having that community and that connection online is really important now more than ever. Prior to joining Discord, I've been a Chief People Officer at some other startups and in people leadership roles at larger companies as well. So the Samsungs and AOLs of the world, wow, I'm dating myself when I say AOL, and Discovery Channel. But I found that my sweet spot is really working with startups and rapidly scaling companies. I enjoy the ability to build. I really enjoy being in that sort of intersection or cross-section between being tactical and hands-on and building and scaling and laying the groundwork and infrastructure, but then also thinking 10 steps ahead around how we scale and grow a business to truly enable us to deliver against business results. Since I joined Discord a year and a half ago, we've had tremendous growth. We've doubled in size from an employee base. Our user growth is exploding. And the challenges that we face and that we'll get to talk about together today are really fun and interesting challenges. I've found that I'm learning so much lately, and I'm just excited to be here and spend this time with Anna and with Roli and with all of you. So thanks for including me.
Thank you. Thank you. Anna, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Anna Fraser, and I lead the people team at Sonos. I am based down here in Santa Barbara, California. It is trash day in my neighborhood, so I've got quite a bit of background noise going on. Forgive me. I've been at Sonos for almost 4 years now, after about a decade at Google. Where I was based up in Mountain View and lived in San Francisco. So I do not miss the commute, but I do miss the people. Google was just an incredible experience to, be part of something through such hyper growth, pretty much in its entire existence. But the time I was there, we went from about 7,000 people to over 70,000. So just, saw incredible scale, incredible opportunity, and was able to experience, I think, a lifetime's worth of people and business experiences in my time there. Had the opportunity to join Sonos, first being introduced to it as a customer and just loving the product. And then it's funny being in this space, it wasn't even on my radar as an employer. And then when the opportunity came up and I got to know the team and the people here and, dig a bit deeper around the mission, the technology, and the opportunity, it's just been an incredible ride for me. I started when we were in the process of going through a CEO transition. So the founder and original CEO was in the process of stepping down, handing things over to an internal successor. So I had the opportunity to start my role right as the new CEO was starting his role. So happy to speak about that at all. But about 18 months after joining, we did go through an IPO, and then have just been really on quite a transformation since then in terms of the velocity of our product releases and pace of innovation. And then, of course, the last 6 to 8 months here have been another lifetime of experience. So looking forward to sharing some of the things we've been learning along the way, and lots more to come, I'm sure.
Wow, we have such incredible breadth of experience between both you and both Anna and Heather here. Everything from a really small company scaling incredibly fast to Google that is, scaling from 7 to 70,000. That must be some ride. So before I really kick off this session with a couple of questions that we've been really thinking about would be really valuable, and they came through some of the registration inputs. Quick reminder for everyone on the call: if you have questions, please feel free to send your questions through the question tab on the Zoom link. So there is a small Q&A box on right next, in the Q&A section. So please feel free to ask your questions there. And so I'm going to kick it off with a question to both of you. One, which is, our worlds just changed overnight. We went from everybody in the office, a majority of the organizations being in the office, to a world everybody is working remotely. I'm really curious to hear from both of you as head of people, chief people officer for the organization. How did you navigate the company through that change? There's so many components to that change, everything from recruiting to people to culture. Like, I'm curious to hear, like, what was that journey like for you? And what did you learn from that process, and things that you would, that didn't work well?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So Sonos is about 1,500 people globally. And we, I'd say we had the advantage of always being a globally distributed team. So we're based here in Santa Barbara, but our fifth co-founder started our Boston office. So right from the beginning, we've sort of had a dual development footprint. We've always done our manufacturing in China and had a big sales presence in Europe as well. So really got used to working collaboratively and across time zones and without all being together physically in person right from the beginning. So, fast forward to COVID, we benefited from, not really having to train our workforce in how to collaborate across cultures and across time zones when you couldn't all be together. That said, we've got a big team in China, we've got a big team in Seattle. So it really has felt like since the beginning of 2020, it's just been a bit of a follow the sun approach to the pandemic in terms of where, where our employees and customers are affected. And I think, stepping back, what's so striking about where we are in the world today is just, COVID and the recession and the racial justice climate crisis. Everything has been so severe and so broad ranging and impactful to all of us across, every industry, every walk of life. And so, we're all sort of thrust into this environment where we're making decisions, so quickly based on, information that is changing daily, if not hourly. And I think, we're trying to use what works. We're trying to learn and adjust as we go. And I think we're all having to channel our inner entrepreneurs a bit and get really scrappy. There's just not time for perfect playbooks, perfect pitch decks, exhaustive socialization. So, I think for our employees, and then I'll turn over to Heather maybe to talk more on the hiring side, as she's been in rapid growth mode through this time as well. For our employees, for us, it was really kind of almost like a Maslow's hierarchy type approach where, first and foremost, how do you make sure people have what they need in order to, do their jobs and keep living their lives wherever they are. And a lot of people have moved to other locations through the pandemic as they've been trying to, figure out childcare and get access to kind of a safe and comfortable environment. So do they have the right equipment? Do they have the right access? Do they have different needs than what they did in the office? Do they need to adjust their hours? Things like that. We've been pretty laser focused on priorities while also recognizing that those priorities have had to change a lot as everything has changed through the last 6 to 7 months. So initially, like many teams, we were very focused on short-term cash flow. We had to pause on hiring. We had to stop some really critical far along projects and figure out some of the longer term strategic and financial plans. And then, now it's really about how do we expand flexibility and empower our people to do what they need to in work and in life. And we've always been a very high trust, high freedom, non-hierarchical culture, like a lot of the companies in the Valley are. But, I think the chaos of COVID and lack of direction, from other sources, at least in the US, has really left people just craving so much more structure and guidance from their employer. So I think that's a place where we've really tried to pivot and just, overall, whether it's on the employee side or on the candidate side, I think more and more just wherever leaders in every part of the business can lead with empathy in everything that they do. We're all going through a level of stress and uncertainty right now that is unprecedented. And so I think the more we can just try to understand where people are at and meet them where they are, it's just going to put us all in a much better position.
Yeah.
So impressive to hear what Anna has to say. Unlike Sonos, we didn't have a geographically distributed workforce. We're based in San Francisco, and our workforce, other than a few folks that live outside of San Francisco, we're all there, and we had a philosophy about being together, and that collaboration came from us being in the same room. And so we had to really rethink things right away. We're very lucky that we're a communications platform and can use our tools to maintain connection. But just like Anna, we had to really think about that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and really start with the basics first, connecting our employees to each other, right? Making sure that they understand how to use all of the different features of our platform, right? the video and not just the chat, and really making sure that they could use the tools to maintain connection, making sure that they had the right equipment. And so sending things to people's homes to ensure that they had what they needed, establishing desk funds. So if you didn't have a desk at home or a monitor, we put a budget in place to enable each person to set up their desk the way they wanted to, and then really create that connection. Because as Anna pointed out, there are so many different life situations, whether it's a single parent working now at home with a child that needed to be homeschooled, or somebody living in a studio apartment where their desk is, 2 feet away from their bed, and how to separate their work life from their family life or life outside of work, and really giving folks tools. So basic tools like desks, but also creating lots of ways to maintain connection, whether it's around playing games after work, or having a virtual happy hour, or even just opening some of our chat channels, our voice channels, so that people could eat lunch together and have that connection and commiserate. It's been a challenge, right? Anna talked about having to pause hiring. We've actually had explosive hiring and explosive growth throughout this pandemic, because so many more people are at home and want to connect to their community and shared passions on a communication platform like Discord. So I shared a statistic with you yesterday. We've actually grown our company by 30% since the pandemic started. So really just thinking about how to sort of go to first principles thinking and re-architect every step of our candidate journey, and really make sure that we're setting everybody up for success in a remote world. It's been a challenge, but we're really proud of our accomplishments. Does that help?
Very, very helpful. There were two very interesting themes. One, which I'm going to return back to, which is around how do you really engage your employees in a meaningful way? Because it is, as an operating leader at the start of the pandemic, that was like one of the biggest things. I think physically moving into a remote world, we all were kind of very comfortable doing Zoom calls and so on and so forth. The question really for us at Brex was how, employee happiness and health and mental health was like a huge component of creating the engagement and belonging. So we'll come back to that later. But Heather, I know you said in this time frame, Discord had this explosive growth. I'm curious to hear from you in terms of how did you really evolve the interview process and the assessment process, and what tools did you offer to your employees and the interviewers, but also was there things that you did for the candidates as they went through the process in this completely new world? So I'm curious to hear what you've learned through the last 6 months on that.
Sure. Before we needed to all work remotely, we decided to take a test run at, hey, we might need to all be working remotely. So let's think about our recruiting process and how do we evolve it to an online process. And so for the week leading up to our beginning of shelter in place, I worked with our new head of talent. Literally, it was his first week on the job. And we looked at every step of our recruiting process and said, how do we move this online? How do we use the Discord platform to show our candidates from the very beginning the possibilities within our platform by actually moving our entire interview process to Discord? So that meant that we needed to educate and create tools for our candidates on how to use the platform. We needed to rethink things. We had something called Lunch Train, which is a opportunity for a cross-functional group of folks that aren't actually part of the candidates department, but 3 folks that would come together and take a candidate to lunch and really sort of explore the candidate from an attitude perspective, but also just sort of give them an unfettered, unbiased view of what it's really like at Discord. How do we move Lunch Train online and create that similar connection where a candidate can kick the tires and explore us just as much as we're asking them questions? And so we really made an investment in understanding our platform, and then sort of re-architected the process. That was a lesson learned and a recommendation I would have for folks that are still struggling with the interview process online is, don't just try to force fit your existing process into a digital world. We took a step back and said, what are we solving for? What's the experience that we want to create? and didn't attempt to retrofit. We really just sort of built and evolved our process online. We needed to look for different digital tools for our technical tests, or think about ways for other sort of presentation modes, how to give candidates a variety of tools to choose from that made them feel most comfortable, going through the process. Our recruiting coordinators have been the unsung heroes throughout all of this, because I mean, I can't say enough good things about our recruiting team in general, but our recruiting coordinators have been like with our candidates every step of the way. They are a single point of contact. They really, invest in audio visual checks beforehand. What are your preferred pronouns? Let's make sure we build breaks into your day so that you're not back to back in video, because as we know, it can be pretty exhausting to be on video all day. And so really thinking from the candidate perspective, what works, and leveraging that high touch experience with our recruiting coordinators. It's a significant investment on our part, and it's really, we've proven that it's like a worthwhile investment. So this high touch piece means that we need more folks available for, to touch the candidates in the recruiting process, but it's a trade-off that we were willing to make because it really preserved the candidate experience. I'll say the other thing that we've done is, and Anna mentioned this, like we're constantly learning, we have to iterate, right? And so we get a lot of feedback. We do candidate surveys after they've been on site. If they've joined at week 1 and week 6, what's your process been like? What's your onboarding like? And we evolve our process based on that feedback. We do postmortems with the entire hiring team. What worked really well? How will we evolve the process? Where didn't we get enough signal? How do we want to create a better candidate experience? And then our recruiting team as a whole, they spend a lot of time sharing best practices together to up-level everybody. So really being invested in that ongoing journey. I'll say one thing that we really realized didn't work is we didn't expect to be out this long. When we first started working remotely, we said, okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks, right? And so a couple things that we put into our process were a little too high touch and not scalable for 6 to now it'll be almost a year before we go back to the office. Like, let's send our candidates a mug with some coffee and a gift card and things like that. Let's send them an actual care package so that they can have a cup of coffee with us while they're doing their interview. It's not scalable. So we've moved to all digital care packages and things like that to make it a nice experience. But some of the things that we thought would be really high touch and lovely just have proven not to scale as this has progressed.
This is like it's such an incredible story. This is sort of reminding what Anna just said, which is when the pandemic hit, we all had to channel our internal entrepreneurs to really figure out, sort of really go back to the first principles and figure out what is going to work and focus it from a candidate perspective. Anna, curious to hear what were some of the things from your perspective that you thought were, you guys sort of really found were very effective, or things that you kind of like, oh, that didn't work. Don't even try. It didn't work in our context, and this is why.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for Sonos, both on the company side and the candidate side, has just been that we are both a hardware company as well as a sound company, and those are things that that are tough to experience without that in-person contact. So while we've always had interview panels where even when we bring someone on site, they're typically always meeting different teammates around the world on Zoom. So it's not uncommon to have interviewers or candidates over Zoom. One of the most magical things about our process, whether someone did it through the interview experience or through onboarding, was getting to come to one of our labs in Boston or Santa Barbara and really see, okay, how do we do things from the design to prototype to build side on everything from our packaging engineering and all the thought and care that goes into that process to different parts of the radio testing and all of the work our audio engineers do, to the 3D printers and the heat labs, and kind of we do these amazing, like, we have a drop machine where they test all these different things of, like, how do you throw the product around, and what kind of damage can it sustain? And so, it's just that awesome opportunity to really, especially for non-technical folks like myself, to really get really close to the engineering and all of the, all of the intent that goes into the product design. And so we haven't found a replacement for that in the virtual world. As you can imagine, we have a lot of our hiring managers and engineers kind of trying some creative things on different Zoom tours or different videos they've created and things like that. But it's definitely a piece that that we're missing in the process. And I think we will continue to for as long as we're in this arrangement. But I think one of the advantages that we have is similar to what Heather said around, just really building your product into the interview experience. So many of the people who come to Sonos, if they're not already, customers and fans, they do get a speaker from us as part of the interview process as well, when they join as new hires too. So really just getting people engaged with your product right away, however that looks, I think is more important than ever, because they're not going to have that opportunity to do so in the office the way we all did in a pre-COVID world. So I think as we think about kind of the extended working in a virtual work from home environment, how do you connect people with your products and your mission? And then the other side of it is how do you teach and instill the more subtle aspects of your culture and your values and behaviors? So really, if you haven't already, step back and think about what are the very deliberate parts of your culture and the behaviors and values that make your culture work, that your founders have, kind of implicitly instilled in everyone. Those are the types of things that, maybe they're written on posters or whiteboards somewhere in the office, but if you're not finding ways to be intentional and deliberate about that in your digital world, it's going to be incredibly hard for your candidates and your new hires to kind of grasp, what do we value here as an organization? How do I get things done? This person said that, but I think they meant this, and just, really digging into those subtle aspects of the organizational behavior that are typically developed through direct observation are things that you have to be much more intentional about in our current context.
So I'm actually going to sort of ask you, Anna, it's a very important question, which a very important point around, assessing for a culture ad or a culture fit, and sort of making sure that there is the right level of alignment. What is, from your perspective, like, if you were to give a tactical advice of how do you really integrate that in this digital world, like how would you recommend changing that?
Yeah, I think it starts with knowing what you value in your culture, and it's different, but also has some similarities in every organization. So at Sonos, we really lean heavily on our core behaviors, which are respect, transparency, collaboration, and ownership. And so, any of those things can sound pretty vanilla or generic, but what brings them to life, I think, for employees and candidates is, leaders, and ideally it's your founder or your CEO doing this, not just your HR person or your marketing person. Leaders really stepping back and saying, like, what do we care about, why, and how does that show up in our decision making and our daily practices and behaviors, and how do we hold people accountable to that? So it's not, I think culture fit isn't about looking around the organization and saying, yeah, there's people who look like me, or, this person's great because I worked with them before, or they're just like so-and-so. It's about really stepping back and applying some of those, okay, tell me about a time when collaboration was really hard and how did you work through it? And, what would you do differently or what would you do the same? And, really digging into ownership. What does that mean for you? How do you use it as sort of a decision-making North Star? And so ask those, figure out what you care about and then ask those behavioral interviewing questions. Don't just look for, hey, I'm looking for the ping pong table or the happy hours or things like that. It is about the substance.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to now move on quickly to some of the other really important questions that did come through. One of them is around compensation. And so with this world where everybody's, you can work from anywhere you can, how do you think about the compensation philosophy in this distributed world? Should you expect to pay someone living in Denver the same as potentially living in San Francisco? So what is, just from the philosophical perspective, how do you guys think about that?
I'll start. Because again, as I mentioned, we historically have been in San Francisco. We have realized now that we can actually be geographically distributed and be highly productive and highly successful. So we're creating the space for our employees to live in other locations, and it also enables us to recruit in other locations. We're being thoughtful and selective about where we scale, because for us, it's actually a significant amount of work for each new state that we open. But as it relates to compensation, we made a decision that we will do geographic adjustments. So if we're hiring in Denver, we'll look at the cost of labor in Denver and apply an adjustment accordingly from our San Francisco wages. We're doing that both with our existing employees who choose to move to other locations, but also we're doing that as we grow and scale and hire in those locations. Now, for our employees, we said that can be a really big adjustment, and this is a difficult, again, highly unusual time. So we're telling you now, we told our employees 2 months ago, if you move, we'll geographically adjust, but we made the decision to geographically adjust in January of 2021. That gives our team a lot of time to prepare. And it also makes sure that we're adjusting for longer term moves, as opposed to, I'm gonna go work from my parents' house for 6 months because I'm struggling. And we feel like this enables us to really be thoughtful about how we continue to grow and scale without creating unintentional pay inequities by having San Francisco wages in other geographies that just don't require it. We don't believe that it's going to negatively impact our ability to recruit or retain, because we're demonstrating a tremendous amount of flexibility, and for our existing employees, giving them that advance notice so that they can plan accordingly or make the right decisions for them.
Makes sense. Great. I'm going to move on to the next topic. Now that you've hired incredible talent and being able to sort of bring them on board, what are some of the best practices from your perspective in bringing in someone and getting them onboarded and making sure that they are integrated in the company? Because one of the first, one of the hardest thing for a new employee is, it's like a new company. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of it's a new product, new company, new people. And the informal conversations that people would have to really feel like they're part of a culture, that's no longer an option. So how do you think about really onboarding them in a way that they can also be integrated in effectively? And do you want to take this one, or Heather?
I'm going to kick it over to Heather because she's done a lot more remote onboarding than we have over the last 6 months.
Please chime in though, because I know you're doing some fantastic work at Sonos. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, we've added 30% of our employees have never been to our office, never seen us or met us in person. They haven't, been able to see the tangible sort of building related elements of our culture. We have our foundation is in games, and you walk into our lobby and there's really cute characters, our Wumpus, which is our mascot, our video games and things. And so we need to try to create those connections without the ability to see and feel that. And so you know, especially after we've made such a significant investment in hiring people, the onboarding piece is critical. It's critical regardless of whether we're working remotely or in the office, but especially more so connecting our new employees to our culture. So Anna was talking about really, you know, being thoughtful in the interview process about the connection to values and what those histories are and the things that are important. And so we do that where we connect folks to our values. Our CEO teaches a class called Discord Past, Present, and Future. It's about sort of where we've come from and where we're going to. The more that we can create context and help connect the dots for employees about how their role is delivering against the strategic goals of the company or how they're adding value is really important. So that's from a business perspective. We've doubled down, if that's a phrase we can use, we've doubled down on creating manager tools, right? How does a manager think about creating connection for their employees? Before every new hire class starts, we pull all of the managers together and talk about, you know, like, what does the first week look like now? How do we make sure that there's daily check-ins? Because you can't walk past somebody's desk and see that they might, you know, be struggling with something. So what are the virtual versions of that? We assign a buddy. We do new hire happy hours where we do a little bit of an interview with the new hire and figure out what their passions are, where they grew up, and then find people that have common connections across the organization. We send a lot of swag to the house because the hoodie does matter, right? And having your Discord hoodie as you're on video with folks, or, you know, these fun little momentums. We ask folks what's important to them, what their favorite cartoon characters were, their TV show when they grew up, and we send things so that they can put it on their desk and have that headphones so they can hear effectively. But also just buddies and mentors and connecting them to passions. We have a lot of channels on Discord that are focused on the day-to-day of business, but we also have off-topic things, whether it's about different clubs that you want to be a part of. I'm on the cycling channel, and we talk about things, or we connect our employees to the different ERGs. And so really making a specific investment in those connections has been critical. And then I mentioned it before, we also ask them, how's it going? Where do you feel connected? What's confusing? And we use that to iterate on the process. Now I'm rambling. Anna, what else would you add?
I don't know. The hoodie matters is my takeaway there.
Yeah.
I think that's all really great advice. Just the only other things I'd add are the, you know, for us, it's about kind of balancing, like, we have a ton of transparency at Sonos, even more so than, you know, my previous life at Google, which I'd also say was very transparent, but that is amazing and inspiring, but it can be really overwhelming for new hires, especially when, you know, you don't have someone to turn to and be like, should I go to that meeting? Does it matter? Like, I'm on this Slack channel. Do I need to pay attention to it? Like, you know, so just someone who can really sort of be your, you know, your organizational Sherpa and point you to, you know, what do you need to pay attention to? How do you find information? How do you get things done? I think the more, you know, whether it's through formal buddy programs or just making sure that, you know, every week they're meeting like 3 or 5 people outside of your direct team, wherever you can be really intentional about building relationships and giving people prompts for what to talk about. As silly as it sounds, you know, we're all grown-ups, we're all, you know, accomplished in our lives academically, professionally, and whatnot, but you know, it's scary to start social interactions from scratch. And, you know, especially in the current climate where everyone knows, you know, we've got Zoom fatigue and people are busy and, you know, their families need things from them. So it's just that much harder to schedule like an intro or a coffee chat with someone you don't know. And so think about whatever you can do to break down those walls for people and normalize it and say, you know, we value it. We want to make space for it because we know it matters. And then, you know, I think when in doubt, like, default to your inner sort of camp counselor or orientation guide at college. I think there are a lot of best practices out there and just fun, quirky things that people do outside of the business world that I think we can all learn from. And, you know, I think COVID, again, has been a great equalizer of, you know, just everyone sort of wanting to share, okay, this is what I'm trying, it was a disaster, or this worked great. And so there's so much we can all learn from out there across LinkedIn and Medium and so many other platforms. I'm not a Discord user yet, but I'm excited to check it out.
We'll get you there.
Yes. All right, I'm actually going to move very quickly to another topic that I know is very important. And Anna, I've heard you say this before, which is culture is the most important recruiting tool, right? And my question really is, in this world, how do you infuse culture and keep people really excited when you don't have those happy hours and those socials and rally people on things? I mean, I'm curious to hear from you, because we tried a few different things at Drex which worked well and some didn't, but I'm very interested to hear in terms of how do you think about infusing that culture broadly, not just for the new hires, across the organization.
Yeah, sure. For us at Sonos, it really, our culture, thrives around the shared love and passion for our products. So I think, we tend to be at our best anytime we can connect over a love of, music or content, or, here's what I'm listening to, or check this out. And, we've tried lots of different things, and some have worked and some have died out, like the Zoom happy hours and trivias and things like that. But, some of the most powerful connection moments, I think, have been one, just we've really increased our frequency of internal communication. So we have weekly internal all hands, we call them Sonos sessions, that I'm going to one right after this actually, that our CEO hosts. And, those will be a mix of product updates, company news, and just open Q&A forums. So really just having that channel where we can make sure that we're constantly hearing from employees on what's top of mind, having a very direct and personal connection with leaders. I actually think for us, again, COVID's been a good equalizer where, people just outside of Santa Barbara in particular, I think, feel much more connected to the CEO and the leadership team than they did when we were in the office, because, sometimes the geography was a little bit more limiting there. So that's kind of the most, I guess, obvious organizational tool, but, making sure your leaders keep up that commitment is hugely important. And then we've tried, just a lot more fun things and kind of really quirky or low tech things. So just sending around quick video messages from our CEO or from different employee resource groups. I think having people share a little bit about what their home office space looks like. Some of our engineers have built incredible test setups in their house where you just see the way they've wired different equipment, and it blows your mind, what they've been able to replicate. But people sharing, what's working in their space, how they're making it inspiring, what's hard, like just, having kids and dogs running through and all that. I think wherever people can bring in those moments of human connection and share a bit more about, like, this is what excites me outside of work, and this is what I'm thinking about when we're on this call. I've got, these 5 other things kind of pulling me in different directions. Those have been some of the most powerful and less obvious moments that have connected people across their culture, because it's really strengthening the relationships that people have with one another, and then also, with our products and with the company as a whole.
That's awesome. One of the things that we did at Drex, which I thought was really, really helpful, was it's very hard in a remote world to really, to recognize people for great work. And so we we as a leadership team did a couple of things. One, it was almost like just a simple note from the CEO to any employee in the company to feel like there is a level of connection, because what has been lost in going completely remote is this, it's like walking by the hallway and seeing your CEO saying, hey, great job on that project, oh, excellent presentation. And so really now sort of replicating some of that has been really helpful. And the other thing, which from a tactical perspective, that really got people excited is when we would, so just on the sales organization, every month we actually recognized 3 people who were what we call were the MVPs for the month. These are people who exemplified the leadership leverage and the results on the team. We actually just created a Zoom background with their pictures on. And so for the next month, everyone in the organization would actually have that Zoom background there. And so it was like a month of feeling extremely connected and special. Was sort of, little things. So going back to, I think what Anna said, is really go back and understand what is it that your employees really value and care, and what are they really missing, and really find ways to really incorporate that in a different way.
I love those ideas. I'm going to steal some of them. You're so right. I mean, people just, I think now more so than ever, they want to be seen, and that is incredibly hard to do, over the screen. So, especially like if your organization has gone through layoffs or cost-cutting measures, we had to earlier in the spring, and it's so difficult. And so, people are, I think, more so than ever anxious about, like, am I having impact? Do people still, do they think of me? Do they know I'm trying? Do they know I'm working hard? So anything that your leaders and your global team can do to recognize and reinforce that is huge.
I'll just echo that, right? And the best way is to truly give employees a variety of spaces, right? Whether it's a CEO reaching out and giving sort of a virtual high five and acknowledgement, or giving employees a confidential space to ask those questions or to provide feedback. We just completed an employee pulse survey to manage, or to measure engagement while we've been out. And we got a wealth of information about what's working, things that our employees want us to keep doing, and where there's gaps. And I love it because it gives us this space to create the programs and the tools that are actually what our employees are craving and needing. So if you're not doing that, think about proactively asking as opposed to assuming what we think folks are going to need to be successful. Sometimes you get a lot of value just out of asking, like what are some of those tools and strategies, and how can we deliver those for you?
It was one of the questions that I'm looking in the Q&A here, which is like, how do you really constantly get feedback from your employees to make sure you're making those shifts? Heather, what tool were you using? I have to ask.
I love that you ask because you know the answer. No, we use Culture Amp. We love Culture Amp. We've used it. We implemented it at the end of 2019. And it was great to actually have a baseline of engagement survey data before we ever went out on, a shelter in place and this extended work remotely period. We've done 2 additional surveys since then. And I'll be honest and candid and say I was sort of prepping our leadership team to expect a dip in engagement, right? Despite all of our efforts, 6 months of working remotely and knowing that at a minimum, we won't go back to the office until March could mean that we do get this virtual fatigue. I'm really delighted that we saw our engagement score go up 4 points. We had really high participation, amazing feedback from our employee population. So right now we're working sort of at the company level on company-wide action planning. What are those strategies that we can put in place to kind of reinforce what's working well or address things that aren't? And then a deep emphasis with each of our functional leaders on how to really plan and take action at the team level as well. So we're using Culture Amp. We love it.
That's great. One of the other questions I'm looking in the Q&A section was similar, but really focused on new hires and hires that have been, sort of getting feedback on their onboarding process. Is there a different process or tool that you use to make sure that you're constantly getting feedback on what's working from the new hires?
We use Culture Amp for new hire surveys as well. So we do a candidate survey for any person that's come in and talked to us at Discord. But for our new hires, we do a survey at the end of week 1 to see how their candidate onboarding experience from the offer process all the way through week 1 orientation looked. And then at week 6 to truly make sure that they have the context. They understand how their work impacts the success of the business. We do a lot of, that sounds impersonal just to do surveys. It's a great anonymous tool where folks can provide feedback, but we stay very closely connected with our new hires as well. And just like Anna at Sonos, we have this culture of transparency and really making sure that folks feel empowered to offer feedback. Two-way feedback is critical. And so we solicit it often and take their feedback to ensure that we're evolving our processes.
Great.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to ask. It doesn't, the tools and the platforms like Culture Amp and Humu and Glint and all of those are amazing. And you can also just, whether it's through Slack or Google Forms or SurveyMonkey, there are so many free and simple options too, but people want to be seen and they want to be asked. So whatever forum sort of works for you in where you are in your evolution, just go for it and keep trying different things.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. People want to be seen. One of the big shifts that we've talked about most of this conversation is around remote working. The other defining theme, Anna, as you started the conversation, was really this is the year where there's a lot of question about diversity and inclusion. And just, just like we've been tested in so many different ways from a racial justice. I guess my question for you both is how are you really seeing this shift to remote and making sure that we're actually still creating an environment and hiring the right diverse set of talent? Anna, do you want to take that?
Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
You start.
I think probably the events of the last 6 months have just, they've just put such a spotlight on something that is sadly not new in any way, but I think business leaders across every industry, every demographic are frankly just awakening to the responsibility that we have as leaders to leverage our resources and our influences and create, ways to make progress within our communities and our societies. And there's no magic answer here by any means, but I think, wherever we can lead with heart and empathy and, make space for the conversation, whether it's people needing to, reflect on whatever horrible news has just happened the day before to, thinking about, okay, how do we build more diversity and inclusion into our product design or our culture, or, where do we not have the right voices in the room, things like that, like just finding different ways to make space for it and make it part of your conversation if it's not already. Data is obviously a very powerful place to start. If you don't yet know what your organization looks like, it's hard to know if you're making progress. So that's a great place to start. And don't be scared by the numbers. They're not going to be pretty. They aren't in any industry. And so just get the data, understand the data, and start having conversations about what progress would look like for you and where do you want to look for different kinds of talent. I think that's one of the hardest things in the early growth stage is you're leaning so heavily on your network, you're leaning on, your investors network, things like that. And they will be people who, have similar experiences and look like the people you already have. So the more you can be intentional and proactive about it in the early days of building your company, the better. And start with structure, which is the hardest thing to do in a hyper-growth environment. It's, we need help yesterday, but, really force yourselves and your hiring managers to sit down and write a job description and have some of that objective criteria that you can assess candidates against, and know that sometimes it's going to take longer to find different types of talent than you have today. And you're going to have to introduce people to your company and your story if they don't know you already. And so just building some of that tolerance for, it's going to take longer, but we're going to invest in it because we believe it's the right thing for the company and the business.
Have you, I'm curious to know, either one of you, have you built processes and tools or used tools to really manage the biases in the interview process? So let's say you do bring the right candidate into the interview funnel. Are there tools that you're using today to really manage to that?
I'll start here. And Anna was spot on when she said having structure. Right? Creating a job description, investing in what are the good questions that enable us to get signal? What are the consistent questions we're going to ask each candidate? And what are we looking for? Right? And so really having a well-defined interview flow and an interview packet for each of the interviewers. In terms of other tools, so we've made an investment right now. Every single employee at Discord goes through unconscious bias training just to sort of introduce this concept. But we have really partnered with an external company to look at every stage in our recruitment process, every interview, how we write our job descriptions to help us ensure that we're being as inclusive as possible and removing bias. We'll never fully remove bias, but creating awareness and thinking about strategies to mitigate through each step in the process has been tremendously helpful. So those are a couple of the tools. We also use a tool to ensure that our job descriptions, as we post them, use a very inclusive tone and language, and we don't unintentionally push people away because it sounds like a culture that they wouldn't feel like they could have a sense of belonging in. And so that's very deliberate in our process.
Thank you. We are almost at time. I have no idea how the hour has gone by with this incredible conversation. Thank you both, Heather and Anna. One of my key takeaways from this conversation, I'd give you both 30 seconds each to go after, but one of my key sort of recommendation that I picked up was really look at your processes from a very first principle level, and when you're thinking about building your hiring process, do not retrofit your offline process into a digital. Think about it from a candidate perspective. That's like a huge takeaway for me. Heather, one last thought from your end for the team here.
I would say don't think like you have to have all the answers. This is a highly unusual time for all of us. Lean on your network, lean on us, right? Don't flick off the logo of one company's best practice and assume it's going to work well, but really sort of lean in and figure out what's happening in other organizations and what are those elements that you can bring to your company to truly help preserve culture and drive engagement during these times. We should all have pretty deep networks that we should lean on and feel very comfortable being vulnerable with, so that we can come up with the best solutions and programs for our employees.
Great, thank you. Anna, final thoughts.
I would say embrace the ambiguity and the opportunity to get to something better. We're not necessarily going to go back to normal or back to how we were pre-pandemic. So embrace that COVID is accelerating a lot of trends like collaboration technology and more freedom and flexibility in the workforce. And so you know, just buckle up and keep learning and trying different things along the way, because it is going to continue to be a new world, and we're just seeing a much faster pace of change than ever before.
This has been great. Thank you both so much. This was an amazing conversation. I've taken many, many takeaways from here. And like Anna and Heather said, please tap into your network. We're here available for any questions you may have. We're all learning along the way. So look forward to building an amazing world together.
Thank you.